Welcome to Serial Killer Saturday. What makes a serial killer? Is it trauma? Is it a childhood filled with horrible events that inspire them? Is it the chemical makeup of the brain? Are there predetermined genetic traits that no matter the environment would allow the urge to kill to manifest? Or is it a combination of all of them? If you could find out what creates a monster, could you not also stop a monster from ever being made? A serial killer is defined as a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive, and typically following a characteristic, predictable behavior pattern. As this series progresses, you will see with your own eyes and learn as you listen along that serial killers have no specific gender, no specific ethnic background, no specific age, no specific region. The only thing that they have in common is the drive to kill. Carl Eugene Watts, A.K.A. Coral, A.K.A. the Sunday Morning Slasher. Number of victims, between 22 and more than 100. Date of murders, 1974 through 1982. Carl Eugene Watts was born on November 7th, 1953, in Killeen, Texas, to Richard Eugene Watts and Dorothy Mae Young. His father was a private first class in the Army, and his mother was a kindergarten art teacher. When Watts was less than 2 years of age, his parents separated, and he was raised by his mother. Watts and his mother moved to Inkster, Michigan, and in 1962, Dorothy Mae married a mechanic named Norman Caesar, with whom she had 2 daughters. As a child, Watts was described as being strange. Around the age of 12, Watts claimed that this is when he started to fantasize about torturing and killing girls and young women. During adolescence, Watts began to stalk girls and is believed to have killed his first victim before the age of 15. When Watts was 13, he was infected with meningitis, which caused him to be held back in the 8th grade. Upon his return to school, Watts had difficulty keeping up with the other students. At school, he would often receive failing grades and was reading at a 3rd grade level by the age 16. He also suffered severe bullying at school. On June 29th, 1969, Watts was arrested for sexually assaulting 26-year-old Joan Gave. When Watts was tried, he was sentenced to the Lafayette Clinic, a mental hospital in Detroit. According to a psychiatric assessment, Watts was revealed to have a full-scale IQ of 68 and to have delusional thought process, though a police officer interrogating Watts after his arrest later stated that he appeared to be very, very intelligent, with an excellent memory. He was released from the Lafayette Clinic on November 9th, 1969. Despite his poor grades, Watts graduated from high school in 1973 and received a football scholarship to Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. He was expelled from Lane College after only 3 months because he was accused of stalking and assaulting women. Another reason he was expelled was because many people at Lane College believed Watts was a suspect in the brutal murder of a female student. However, there was not enough evidence to convict him of the murder. After his expulsion, he moved to Houston, Texas. Watts' career as a serial killer began when he was 20 years old in 1974. By kidnapping his victims from their homes, torturing them, and then murdering them. On October 30th, 1974, Watts tortured and brutally murdered 20-year-old Gloria Steele, who was believed to be his second victim. Watts, who was African American, almost always killed young white women. Watts killed females between the ages of 14 and 44, using methods such as strangulation, stabbing, bludgeoning, and drowning. Watts had murdered dozens of women between 1974 and 1982, and despite the many women he murdered, Watts was not discovered as a serial killer for almost 8 years. There were several reasons for this. He attacked in several different jurisdictions and even different states. Even with the advent of DNA testing, it was still nearly impossible because he rarely performed sexual acts on his victims. Unlike most serial killers of all women and girls, his crimes were not thought to be sexually motivated. Watts was also not suspected to be involved with any of the murders by the people who knew him, and was not a police suspect in any of the murders until his arrest in 1982. On May 23, 1982, Watts was arrested for breaking into the home of 2 young women in Houston and attempting to kill them. Watts had spotted a woman leaving a Houston nightclub and followed her home. Michelle Madej was killed on her 20th birthday, and her body was dumped into a bathtub. Then Watts moved on to another apartment complex where he would confront his last 2 victims. The following is a quote from Melinda Aguilar. "He came in and grabbed me and started choking me, and he told me if I screamed, he would kill me." Melinda had just turned 19. Watts tied up Aguilar and her roommate and began filling the bathtub with water. She also said, "He was excited and hyper and clapping and just making noises like he was excited that this was going to be fun." She had no doubt that Watts was going to kill her. He clapped and jumped at one time, and that's when I knew I had to do something. As Watts tried to drown her roommate in the bathtub, Aguilar managed to escape, throwing herself off of the 2nd floor balcony. Neighbors called the police. The roommate was saved, and Watts, a 28-year-old bus mechanic, was arrested as he tried to flee. While in custody, police began to link Watts with the recent murders of a number of women. Until early 1981, he had lived in Michigan, where authorities suspected him of being responsible for the murders of at least 10 women and girls there. Watts had previously been questioned about the murders in 1975, but there had not been enough evidence to convict him. At that time, Watts had spent a year in prison for attacking women who survived. Prosecutors in Texas did not feel they have enough evidence to convict Watts of murder. So in 1982, they arranged a plea bargain. If Watts gave full details and confessions to his crimes, they would give him immunity for the murder charges, and he would instead face just a charge of burglary with intent to murder. This charge carried a 60-year sentence. He agreed with the deal and promptly confessed in detail to 12 murders in Texas. However, Michigan authorities refused to go in on the deal, so the cases in that state remained open. Watts later claimed that he had killed 40 women and has also implied that there were more than 80 victims in total. He would not confess outright to having committed these murders, however, because he did not want to be seen as a mass murderer. Police still consider Watts a suspect in 90 unsolved murders. Watts was sentenced to the agreed 60 years. However, shortly after he began serving time, the Texas Court of Appeals ruled that he had not been informed that the bathtub and water he attempted to drown Lori Lister in was considered a deadly weapon. The ruling reclassified him as a non-violent felon, making him eligible for early release. At the time, Texas law allowed non-violent felons to have 3 days deducted from their sentences for every 1 day served, as long as they were well behaved. Watts was a model prisoner and had enough time deducted from his sentence that he could have been released as early as May 9th, 2006. The law allowing early release was abolished after public outcry, but could not be applied retroactively according to the Texas Constitution. In 2004, Michigan Attorney General Mike Cox went on national TV asking anyone to come forward with information in order to try and convict Watts of murder to ensure he was not released. Joseph Foy of Westland, Michigan came forward to say that he had seen a man fitting Watts' description murder Helen Dutcher, a 36-year-old woman who died after being stabbed 12 times in December 1979. Foy identified Watts by his eyes, which he described as being evil and devoid of emotion. Although Watts had immunity from prosecution for the 12 killings he admitted to in Texas, he had no immunity agreement in Michigan. Before his 2004 trial, law enforcement officials asked the trial judge to allow the Texas confessions into evidence, which he agreed to. Watts was promptly charged with the murder of Helen Dutcher. A Michigan jury convicted him on November 17, 2004, after hearing eyewitness testimony from Joseph Foy. On December 7th, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. 2 days later, authorities in Michigan started making moves to try him for the murder of Western Michigan University student Gloria Steele, who was stabbed to death in 1974. Watts' trial for the Steele murder began in Kalamazoo, Michigan on July 25, 2007. Closing arguments concluded on July 26th. The following day, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Watts was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole on September 13th. He was incarcerated at a maximum security prison in Ionia, Michigan. He died of prostate cancer on September 21st in a Jackson, Michigan hospital. Well, I think we all learned something new, didn't we? Mainly to watch your back, because people are the scariest monsters of all. See you next time.